Most coding tools are trying to own your workflow. Pi is different. Pi gives you the base agent and then lets you build the workflow layer on top of it. That's why I built Pi Workflow Suite. Hello, I'm Jeremy Grove, founder of Metadata Fusion. In this video, I will show you why I like Pi, why I built the Pi Workflow Suite on top of it, and why I think the workflow layer matters more than chasing one perfect model and coding tool. Pi was created by Mario Zechner, who has had some notable success as an independent Java game developer. Pi came to my attention, as with many other developers, as Pi is the underlying framework that OpenClaw is built upon. And the notable thing about Pi, as you'll see on there are many agent harnesses, but this one's yours. And that is exactly the methodology of Pi, which I can really appreciate. If you watched any of my other videos, a lot of my videos are basically different guides on how to set up Factory AI Droid, Claude Code, and how to make them work with other models. And this is what Pi is exactly set up to do. There are many agent harnesses, but this one is yours. So this is exactly the type of tooling that is very interesting to developers such as myself, as you don't necessarily have to hack it apart, as which I do to all the other tools. If you've watched any of my videos before, you'll notice that I have different guides available on my website, metadatafusion.com, under the resources section, guides, such as a Claude Code multi-provider setup and switcher guide, and how to set up Factory AI Droid in a similar way to where you can make them work with different models, etc. Pi solves this problem natively, as to where you would have to hack up those other tools, which I do, and I have guides to do this, but Pi does this natively. So Pi is basically built bare bones. It is the agent harness. It's got the base agent setup, and then you can add extensions. So when you first install Pi, you're not going to have any MCP, no subagents, no permission pop-ups, no plan mode, no built-in to-dos, no background bash. This would be like being in YOLO mode. It has everything out there. And that's actually what you want, because when you're installing Claude Code, Factory AI Droid, you basically have a surplus of features. Many of those features you may not even use, but they're still having a tax on your tokens and your system. So this is where Pi becomes very interesting, especially to developers, because we can customize this to our own workflow. And so this is why I built my own workflow suite. And these are practices that I've already been doing, and I was able to do this with Pi. So this is what prompted me to build my own extension, Pi Workflow Suite. And this is actually quite a comprehensive extension. So this may be more than what you want, or it may be exactly what you want. I guess it's going to depend on your workflow, but this is definitely mine, and I'm a professional developer doing all types of projects, and these are basically a lot of the workflows that I use. So I have a standard, plan, and a mission mode. Mission basically is going to be for long running sessions. I mean, could be up to 24 hours, depends on what you want to do. And I'm going to be even improving this over time. And we have various presets that you can use, like standard, simple, standard, deep, and maximum, or you can go into the settings and customize it exactly how you want, because you can have gates after each milestone, etc. And plan is a little bit different. It's a little bit lighter network, a little bit lighter of a check for a little bit shorter, and standard is going to be basically a standard workflow, but you're going to have access to all the different sub-agents and browser checks. And of course, there's themes. You can customize the themes and all of these things. You can go to pi.dev and you can check this out. I'll have links in the description, how you can go directly to this. But as you'll know from some of my other videos, I'm big on the right model for the right use case. And that's exactly what you can customize in here. You can customize the agent that you want to use for planning, which I think is really important, because I will use a specific high-cost model for planning and a different model for execution. For example, I think the best bang for your buck right now for planning is OpenAI with Codex. And a good executor right now is GLM, which they actually just came out with GLM 5.2. I have still yet to test that very much. So when you first load Pi and then you install the extension, it will show up like this. This will be in idle mode. Okay, we have a top and a bottom widget, which these are fully configurable in settings. You can remove them, or you could show and hide them with the hints. The hints will be different if you're on Windows as opposed to Mac. So standard mode, you can add it like this. You'll have the top and bottom widget, plan mode, and then mission mode. Okay, so you have different things there. Give me a breakdown of this repository. So, and you can configure the models that you want to use, whether you have shared models across all the modes, or you can do individual settings per mode. So you'll see it's just doing a quick to-do mode. Keep in mind it's going to use the agents that I already have built in, so you'll still get the features of a general worker, a code-based agent, quality and validation, reviewing, etc. So you'll still get quite a few quality inputs, and I'm going to add some more features to this in the future. And you'll see the agents kicking off down there in the right-hand side. I'm on the deep preset. So these presets are currently configured to have 4 sub-agents. You can put them on auto. You can even force more. So now we're here in plan mode, and you're going to have a plan ID, which you can actually resume a plan. The same with mission. So you'll have a plan ID, and you can actually save these, and you'll have specific gated movements in plan and mission mode. So planning, first it will come up with the plan, and in settings you can add an optional reviewer. A reviewer would challenge the plan, review it, and decide whether it needs to be repaired or updated. And the plan, generally you would have the validator validate after all the steps of the plan, but you can even configure that if you wanted to do it after every step. But that would probably be excessive in plan mode. If you wanted to do that, you would most likely go to mission, which by default mission is going to validate after every milestone. So you'll see in plan mode, we got 3 parallel agents kicking off. They've been spawned by the agent to do the research to get together the plan. And we have dynamic clarification built in. So for my planning agent, I have GPT 5.5 high. And I believe currently for the executing agent, I have GLM 5.2, which literally was just released yesterday, and I just became available today. I haven't tested it a lot, but I like GLM. My GLM 5.1 was a great executor. We'll see about 5.2. So far, my initial testing, GLM 5.2 seemed very slow. I'm going to assume it has something to do with the thinking, so I've turned thinking off for GLM. But GLM has actually been a very, very good model for me. And I have an affiliate link in the description below. If you want to get that, I think you can get 10% off. So I think GLM already has 10% on some plans, and you could add the affiliate link and get another 10%. So you'll see that I got the dynamic menu. So we'll answer the questions guided. So you can do that, or you can just give the feedback. No, just summarize what we have in the repository and give me a few charts. So now it's putting together the final plan, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with this type of plan who have used a similar workflow inside of Claude Code or Factory Droid. Similar, but I've built a little bit of my own likes in here, I want to say. Similar to Claude Code and Factory Droid, but what I like about this is I can literally do it the way I want. Now, I do have the constraints of the Pi harness, but I'm very happy to have those constraints because basically Pi is maintaining the agent foundation and I'm building on top of that. So I will approve this. And I'll just take you through some of the settings. So we have settings for standard, plan, you can customize everything here. Mission, of course. You can customize the theme, depending on what you want. There's a lot of different themes. I will just put it back to a basic one, but there's quite a bit. Whether you want the logo, I could pi, I could do a custom one. I could set the letters. And you can configure the widgets how you want, sub-agents, so you can configure them this shared globally, and you can configure the sub-agents how you want. And I'm going to be improving and fine-tuning these things. You can go and do compaction. So that's actually something that I like to do, is definitely have a select my compaction provider. And of course, we have global safety. By default, Repo Lock for the project is going to be on. If you want your Pi harness to have full access to your whole computer, unprotected YOLO, you'll take the repository lock off. And then we also have other tool guards in here as well. As I explained, that I put together this Pi workflow suite to have a structured workflow for Pi. Pi is the base foundation. And that is one of the very attractive things about Pi, is they're maintaining that. They're maintaining the core foundation. They've got all the models and the basic foundation of the harness. And before I started building, I did want to make sure that this was going to be around before I decide to build on top of anyone else's layer. I want to make sure that it's going to be something that's going to be maintained. So the fact that OpenClaw is built on this gives it very good credibility. So I definitely believe Pi will be around for some time. This is why I decided to go ahead and build my own workflow suite. So Pi is the base you can build on. So you got the core harness, which is the Pi layer, and then my workflow suite, in which there are a lot of other extensions in the marketplace. My workflow suite is the layer on top. And of course, Pi has many other extension and packages you could download. Feel free to browse their package store and look at what you want. But always be careful before you download a package and make sure it's from a credible source, as there always can be malware inside. So it's always good to check them out. So what does my workflow suite add to Pi? Well, it adds idle, standard, plan, and mission. So basically idle mode, you would still have access to the Repo Lock, the themes, and some of the other global permissions. You just wouldn't be gated in some of those other features. So depending on what state that you're working on, you may want to be in idle. Standard is it when you're in quick sprints, and it's more of a verbal queue. So the agents, the way that the agents are configured, it's still going to respond. If you ask it for validation, if you ask it for review, it's going to respond like that. And of course, that's subject to what model that you have plugged in. So if you're putting, just the cheapest model, well, just know the results are not going to be as good. But it depends. You can, that's one of the advantages to plan and mission. You can put different cheaper models into different use cases. And this is a feature I plan to add to change the sub-agents to where you could really put a cheaper model in for that, because that's one place you can even put an even cheaper agent to do sub-agent work. And that's something that would be features coming. So we've got settings, presets, which I think is very handy, but of course you can dig into the settings and configure them very deeply. But you can go from simple, standard, deep, and max for different behaviors, whether you're on standard, plan, or mission, depending on what you want to do. A lot of that is going to be how many sub-agents you're going to get and the different type of validation and gates that you're going to have. So we also have, we have validation, we have web search built in, we have browser access built in, diagrams, Repo Lock, and recovery. So you can recover a plan or a mission as well. We have quite a few skills. We have themes. There's different prompts. Idle mode, basically, is you'll still have access to all these features in idle mode. You can still control the environment. You still have access to Repo Lock, and you can choose the workflow style. Standard mode. So the advantage of standard mode, and honestly, it depends on what you're working on, because I use all the modes. It just depends on what I'm working on and what type of sprint I'm doing. If I'm doing short sprints and very direct targeted work, I will use standard mode. For for a lot of things. So I have access to all the agents, all the features, and less gates. And I do probably thinking about adding a standard plus just to give it a different workflow, because basically these agents are configured in a way that I like them to work. So you're still going to have access to clarification, but that's going to be up to the agent to decide that, but you can configure that in settings, how much clarification you want it to ask you or not. And you're going to have to-do lists in there. And this is the basic standard flow. You'll have auto checks, you'll have clarifications, to-do lists. The agent's going to decide whether a to-do list makes sense or not, and it will validate its work because it's already got these agents built in. So it's lightweight and it's really good for short sprints. Plan mode is when you're doing a little bit more deeper work. That's going to require more validation, where you want to basically have a defined plan, and you want to make sure that plan is refined, and you want that plan to be validated with absolute gates. And depending on what mode, it's going to depend on how hard those gates are going to be and how many workers are going to be assigned in that workflow. So the validator is going to be the last step on that. And you'll see here. So you're going to have the requests. The agent's going to ask you clarifying questions unless it deems that it doesn't need it. It's going to draft the plan. You're going to review it. Now you can configure a reviewer in settings if you want a reviewer for plan mode, which would challenge the plan. Okay, and it would challenge the plan and either approve it or send it for repair. Then you would approve it, and then it would execute the plan, and then it will have to pass validation. And depending on what mode, it's going to decide how many repair attempts it's going to have. Okay, so that's plan mode. Mission mode is going to be definitely for longer work. When you're doing comprehensive work, scaffolding a very big project, maybe database work, you're going to want this for longer milestones. Okay, and the nice thing about this, those are going to be saved. You can also configure in settings how many missions you want it to save. By default, I believe it's 50, and you can change that to less or more or none. So you're going to obviously give the agent your objectives. It's going to configure a plan, and that plan is going to have milestones, and it's going to have to validate after each milestone to pass the next. And depending on the settings, it will decide how many repair retries it would get after each milestone until it gets to a complete mission. And of course, you can configure what model and provider you want for the planning, what model you want for the reviewing, optional reviewing, and what model you want for executing, and what model and provider you want for the validation. Of course, I like to plan currently. I think that OpenAI and Codex is the best value for the money as far as your planner model. For me, hands down. Of course, Opus and the now banned Fable and Mythos 5, but the value is not there. Yeah, they're great models, but the cost of performance doesn't even make sense to me. I'll probably do another video on that. So sub-agents and orchestration. Of course, the sub-agents are very, very good in the planning, and they're very useful in all the phases. This is how you can get a lot more work done, and you can get it done efficiently. And as I stated, that I'm going to add soon the feature where you can configure exactly what you want to do with the sub-agents. So that'll be, and there is a difference between asynchronous agents and background agents, and we can scope the assistance on that orchestration. Validation and repair. So the reviewer is basically, if you have the reviewer enabled, that'll be an optional reviewer on a plan, just to challenge the plan and make sure it's good. Validation is after execution. So like on plan mode, at the end of the complete execution of the entire plan, it would go through a validation. But on mission mode, you're going to validate after every milestone by default, but you can configure that in settings, more or less. And then you're going to configure how many repair and retries you want it to have. We have the web browser tools and the diagram tools. They're all built in. And of course, we'll continue to improve these over time and add in more features. The nice thing about the Pi Workflow Suite, this is not something that I'm necessarily like working on standalone. I use many tools. I use, of course, Factory Droid. I use Claude Code. I use Kilo CLI, Codex. I use all the tools. I'm not locked into any provider or any one tool, period. There are a lot of settings on the Pi workflow suite. So if you want to get in there and tweak everything how you want, there probably should be more than enough. But that's also why I have the shortcuts in case you don't want to dig in there. But myself, I like having options, and I will actually continue to add more. So there's plenty of different settings in there, and we will continue to enrich that over time. Obviously, we have the themes, I think, which I showed earlier in the video. There's actually quite a few themes. You can change the text font, the text style, the color, the widget. You can put your own custom logo. You can choose from different setups on the startup visual. There's quite a few different options on there for those who like that. The safety in the Repo Lock, which is actually really important. By default, it's going to come with Repo Lock on, which is going to basically keep it inside that project folder, not let it touch your other projects. But you can take that off depending on what you want to do. And there's also tool guards and other things as well. We're also got a token limiter. So like specifically if you're in plan or mission, very long running, and you want to limit to your token consumption, you can add that. And we'll continue refining that over time. Of course, the role control and model selection, I think I explained earlier. This is another slide covering that. We can fully configure the planner, fully configure the executor, the reviewer, the validator, which these are actually very important because the reviewer is going to challenge your plan. The validator is going to actually investigate the validation to see if the plan or the mission was carried out correctly. And of course, we can have the custom compaction. You can choose your compaction provider and the compaction model. And you can even configure the trigger percentage if you want as well, or you can use the Pi default. I pretty much just use the Pi default. But I configure I changed the provider, but I use the Pi compaction default as far as the percentage. But you can configure that how you want. Probably will add a shortcut to easily configure memory in a project. If people are interested in that, maybe leave something in the comments. If you're interested in me adding the memory, it's probably something to be very simple for me to put in there because I like to use a lightweight memory. I think memory is useful if you know how to do it, but if you're not using memory correctly, it will quickly become bloated and bog down your system. But if you use it correctly, it can be useful. And if I set it up, I would set it up to be by default useful. So if anybody's interested in that, go ahead and leave that in the comments down below. So the future extensibility of this is what's very nice about this. So I will be able to continue to improve this project. I will be able to configure how the agents work, asynchronous agents and background agents, and how they fan out. And this is actually one of my specialties. It's interesting, Claude Code and Factory Droid are honestly just now doing these things. I've been doing these things for a significant amount of time. So this is actually not new to me. I've been doing this for a long time. And it's actually interesting. Some of these big labs are just now starting to do it. And actually, I give credit, honestly, to OpenClaw, which OpenClaw and this Pi are quite closely related. I give credit to them to actually making the agent thing go viral. Now everybody's getting into it, but I was already doing this, and so were a lot of other developers. It's actually quite a useful tool once you get a swarm of agents working together. And that's actually how you can be more cost efficient, plugging in the right model to do the right job, but you have to have the right orchestration layer to do that. So that is the practical benefit. The workflow suite makes this repeatable, inspectable, configurable, and you can own that process. You can switch from standard, plan, and mission depending on what you want to do. You can configure what agent executes what task, what configuration suits your needs. So that's why I like Pi. Pi gives me the maintain agent foundation. Workflow Suite gives me the operating layer that I can improve over time. The point is not to chase one perfect model or one perfect tool. The point is to own the workflow, how it starts, how it's checked, how it's repaired, and how the system improves over time. If you are building with coding agents, that is the layer that I think matters most. That's it for me. Subscribe, like, and I'll see you in the next one.